Another day, another story. March 24, 1989, one of the worst oil spills in U.S. history begins when the supertanker Exxon Valdez, owned and operated by the Exxon Corporation, runs aground on a reef in Prince William Sound in southern Alaska. An estimated 11 million gallons of oil eventually spilled into the water. Welcome to Tabo. Eminent Channel. Attempts to contain the massive spill were unsuccessful, and wind and currents spread the oil more than 100 miles from its source, eventually polluting more than 700 miles of coastline. Hundreds of thousands of birds and animals were adversely affected by the environmental disaster. It was later revealed that Joseph Hazelwood, the captain of the Valdez, was drinking at the time of the accident and allowed an uncertified officer to steer the massive vessel. In March 1990, Hazelwood was convicted of misdemeanor negligence, fined $50,000, and ordered to perform 1,000 hours of community service. In July 1992, an Alaska court overturned Hazelwood's conviction, citing a federal statute that grants freedom from prosecution to those who report an oil spill. Exxon itself was condemned by the National Transportation Safety Board and in early 1991 agreed under pressure from environmental groups to pay a penalty of $100 million and provide $1 billion over a 10-year period for the cost of the cleanup. However, later in the year, both Alaska and Exxon rejected the agreement, and in October 1991 the oil giant settled the matter by paying $25 million, less than 4% of the cleanup aid promised by Exxon earlier that year. The Exxon Valdez oil spill occurred on March 24, 1989, when the oil tanker Exxon Valdez struck Bligh Reef in Prince William Sound, Alaska. The accident caused one of the worst environmental disasters in history, spilling approximately 11 million gallons, 37,000 metric tons, of crude oil into the ocean. The Exxon Valdez oil spill, a disaster that changed environmental policies. On the night of March 23, 1989, the Exxon Valdez oil tanker, carrying 53 million gallons of crude oil from Alaska's Prudhoe Bay, left the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Terminal in Valdez. At 12:04 a.m. on March 24, the vessel struck Bligh Reef in Prince William Sound, a region known for its pristine waters and rich marine life. Within hours, crude oil began spilling into the ocean at an alarming rate. The immediate aftermath, a spreading catastrophe within days, oil covered 1,300 miles of Alaskan coastline and 11,000 square miles of ocean, making it one of the largest environmental disasters in U.S. history. Wildlife destruction: 250,000 seabirds drowned or died from oil exposure. 2,800 sea otters suffered from hypothermia as the oil destroyed their insulating fur. 300 harbor seals perished due to poisoning and hypothermia. 22 orcas, killer whales, in local pods eventually disappeared, likely due to inhalation of toxic fumes and food contamination. Salmon and herring populations collapsed, devastating the local fishing industry for years. A slow and controversial cleanup. Despite Exxon's promises, the cleanup response was delayed and inadequate. Initial cleanup efforts didn't begin until 3 days after the spill, and bad weather hampered the process. Exxon used chemical dispersants, but they were largely ineffective and harmful to marine life. Crews attempted to burn off some of the oil, but this worked only in small areas. Thousands of workers were deployed to manually scrub rocks and remove oil, but much of it seeped into the ecosystem. Legal fallout and policy changes. Exxon faced lawsuits from fishermen, environmental groups, and the state of Alaska. The U.S. government fined Exxon $5 billion, though years of legal battles reduced it to $507 million. The disaster led to the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, requiring double-hull tankers and stricter spill response protocols. Hazelwood was convicted of a misdemeanor but avoided jail time, receiving community service and fines instead. The lasting legacy of the Exxon Valdez disaster. This event reshaped environmental awareness about oil spills and corporate responsibility. While the area has seen some recovery, scientists believe full restoration could take centuries. The spill remains a stark warning of the risks of oil transportation and the need for stronger safety regulations. A calm night turns into a nightmare. On March 23, 1989, the Exxon Valdez departed from the port of Valdez, Alaska, carrying 53 million gallons of crude oil from the Prudhoe Bay oil fields. The ship was navigating the Prince William Sound, a remote but ecologically rich area, when the unthinkable happened. The man at the center of the storm, much of the blame fell on Captain Joseph Hazelwood, who was accused of being intoxicated at the time of the accident. However, investigations later revealed that while Hazelwood had been drinking earlier, he was not on duty at the moment of impact. Instead, the third mate, an exhausted and overworked officer, was in control. The real issues were systemic. Exxon had cut back crew sizes, leading to overworked sailors. The U.S. Coast Guard, once responsible for monitoring ships, had reduced inspections. The vessel's radar system was broken and had been left unrepaired for over a year. All these factors set the stage for disaster. A sea turned into a toxic wasteland. The consequences of the spill were immediate and devastating. The oil spread quickly, coating the waters in a thick, black sludge. The effects on wildlife were catastrophic. Birds became trapped in the oil, unable to fly or keep warm. Those who tried to clean themselves ingested toxins and died. Sea otters, whose fur insulates them from freezing waters, became hypothermic and drowned. Harbor seals and orcas inhaled toxic fumes, leading to severe health issues. Fisheries collapsed, leaving thousands of Alaskans, especially indigenous communities, without a livelihood. A cleanup effort that made things worse. Exxon launched a massive cleanup operation, but it was too little, too late. Chemical dispersants were dumped into the ocean, but they failed to break down the oil effectively. Attempts to burn the oil produced thick, black smoke, causing air pollution. High-pressure hot water hoses were used on shorelines, but they destroyed fragile ecosystems, making recovery even harder. Workers, many of whom had no proper protective gear, suffered from headaches, nausea, and long-term respiratory issues. The legal battle that dragged on for decades. The disaster sparked one of the biggest lawsuits in U.S. history. Exxon was initially ordered to pay $5 billion in damages, but after years of appeals, the amount was slashed to just $507 million, a decision that outraged the victims. Captain Hazelwood, once the face of the disaster, was convicted of a misdemeanor and sentenced to community service and a small fine. He later faded into obscurity, though his name remains infamous. A lasting legacy. The Exxon Valdez disaster remains a cautionary tale about corporate negligence and environmental destruction. It led to the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, which tightened regulations on oil transportation. The requirement for double-hulled tankers, reducing the chances of similar spills. Greater public awareness of oil spill dangers. Despite these changes, the ghosts of the spill remain. Some parts of Prince William Sound still contain traces of oil, and the local ecosystem has never fully recovered. Scientists estimate that it could take centuries for the area to return to its original state. The Exxon Valdez disaster is more than just a historical event, it is a warning about the dangers of putting profit before safety and the long-lasting scars of environmental destruction. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.